Productivity. Gladiator.
I'm Brian Nelson Palmer. On this show, I share personal, practical productivity skills. And in this episode, we're talking about project management hacks, skills, and tools you can't get from software or AI. And with me on the show today is Bonnie Biafore, who's a LinkedIn Learning author and a consultant on project management. Bonnie, thanks so much for being here with me.
Well, Brian, thanks for inviting me. This is going to be fun.
Absolutely. And now, so we're about to talk about project management skills and hacks and that kind of stuff. So for those folks who aren't already familiar with you, tell them about you and how you're related to this topic.
Well, so I was actually born to be a project manager. From a very early age, I was
really
organizing things.
Yeah.
Drove my mother crazy. But what's interesting is I ended up going to college and grad school and, had to have a master's in engineering and started working as an engineer and just did not like it. And I just by chance, I got the opportunity to manage a project. And of course, I knew nothing about project management. So I learned a lot by making mistakes. But I ended up, it came very naturally to me. And then over the years, it's, the great thing about project management here, I get bored very easily. So the thing that I love about project management is one, I'm good at it, but two, every project is different. Project management is never boring and there's always something new to learn. So basically, if you're a lifelong learner, it's perfect.
Bonnie, you're preaching to the choir with me. That's my career also. And so I totally understand that every project is different. And that's kind of what makes it fun for me is now you're working on this and then you're working on this. And so it keeps it interesting. I love that. That's a really good point. Now for those, there's a lot of, no, go ahead.
The other thing I was going to say is, I use project management, in my life all the time. I mean, it's
so true.
Whether it's, cooking a big dinner for friends or, going on vacation or whatever it is, I am managing that as a project.
It happens that you don't even think about it, but you're like, oh, well, then here's the steps to this project and here's how this is going to roll out. Totally. Well, now there's a lot of people out there who talk about project management. So what would you say makes you a little different from everybody else out there that's doing this?
Well, let's see. For one thing, I don't take myself too seriously. I mean, I can be serious, but,
Sure.
I used to write technical books and I made them funny because the things I wrote about were very dry. And you're talking about adult learners. So I would, I actually had people contact me and say, I had to explain why I was laughing reading a book about accounting and bookkeeping.
Yeah.
So
you don't take yourself too seriously.
Yeah. And I try to make things relatable.
Absolutely. Let's jump into our topic then. So today we're talking about those project management hacks, skills, and tools you can't get from software. So just for context, when I said software in preparation for this, I was thinking, okay, it's project management software and AI. So I was thinking about you're not going to get these things from Asana or Trello or Microsoft Project or the AI ones like ChatGPT or any of those. Now, are there other ones that came to mind for you when I said project management software and AI?
Yeah, well, for project management software, I mean, there are a lot of tools out there, particularly the lighter weight tools, which honestly I think are more for work management than project management. But they're out there like Trello, Basecamp. I use Basecamp just to keep track of all of my to-dos, my infinite to-do list. But other ones that are kind of at the middle level, which are probably worth, talking about. We've got Monday.com, right? And Smartsheet is interesting because it really is like a super smart spreadsheet, but they've added a lot of things to it. Nice. So those three, because I've evaluated a lot of tools and they're pretty good. And when you get to that high end, like you said, Microsoft, particularly if you're going to go to Project Online, if you have lots of projects and if you have very complicated projects, Project Online and Primavera are,
Primavera.
can handle a lot. However, they often require a knowledgeable consultant to get them set up. And,
Oh, big time.
like
Yeah.
I have people, it's like I work with Project Online, but I could not set it up for somebody. It's very complicated. And Primavera as well.
So let me ask you this, Bonnie, like even with the advanced software and AI that's available, what can't they do?
Well, there are a couple of things. So the first one I will mention is estimating. And the thing about estimating is you can actually get that particularly from the AI side. However, there's a lot of estimating given, again, that every project is different. Every project has a different team, has different challenges. That's where having that je ne sais quoi of knowledge in people's heads of, given what we're looking at, or given these constraints, or given the people who we have on the project, here is my estimate of what it's going to take. And then you can also, for example, one of the estimating tools that I really like is the Delphi method, where you get a bunch of experts together and you say, come up with your estimate. And then you share the estimates. You don't share like why, but you just share the estimates amongst the group. And then if somebody, estimated a lower amount, they might start thinking about why, maybe I forgot. And you do a couple of rounds of that until everyone starts to get, closer.
They come to a consensus of sorts. They all started at different places. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, in some ways, you could say, oh, well, we could get like 3 AIs together and, they could do the same thing. But honestly, right now, I would not trust that.
Yeah. Like, total side note, Bonnie, I have to share this with you. It's so funny that you just said that because I totally do that. And what I think about it, like it's knowledge by committee, in that I inherently don't trust an AI because they, like, the best metaphor is oh my gosh, there was a show we were talking about. It's like having an intern. They're really smart, but like book smart, and they're not street smart. So the stuff they say is like, I don't know. So I will feed it to one, and then I will copy and paste from one into another and ask, is there anything about this that doesn't make sense? And I will, like, so it's almost the Delphi method that you just talked about, except using AIs. I totally do that.
So I think that, the in a lot of cases that they really can't explain. They just have this intuition. And, when you think about just the amount of experience that people have, even someone who's 20 years old, they've still had 20 years worth of experience. And that stuff is just sort of simmering in there. And you just can't get that from tools. So that's one.
Estimate. Okay. That's a really good one. What else?
The second thing is cost management. Now, I will start by saying my first couple of projects were, they were very small projects. They were very informal, small teams. And, like I didn't actually, have to do like a formal risk management plan. And this one project like really didn't have a budget, because it was very small. It was mostly me. Yeah. So I just did it. However, if you're really going to do projects smart, you want to say, okay, what is the goal of the project? What are the outcomes that we want to get from this project? And, is the cost of the project, worth the outcomes? You have that business case that you need to achieve. So, so you're going to have a budget, or you may be tracking revenue, increased revenue, what have you. And honestly, like all of the software tools really don't do a good job at all on cost management. They don't have the features to track the different kinds of costs. I mean, they will to some extent, but you think about just the variations of costs that you can have, and a lot of times you're having to force it to I mean, I tend to, with projects, I end up outputting data and using spreadsheets and, outside of the project management tools, because they really,
True, right?
they just don't handle
Because the
costs.
time and materials are the two things that the project management tools can track, right? Like people's time, how many hours, how many people at what rate, they do that. And then they of
Yeah.
course have, all right, and now we have to buy these materials or these softwares or these whatever fixed price things. That's one. But then how do you factor in the price to delay by a month? Because you then
Yeah.
this is going to cause CNN to pick up the news, and then that's going to make
Yeah.
the stock price go down. And then, I mean, there's you can't possibly, that project management software can't
Well,
do that. It's just time and materials. That's what they
and
do.
then, yeah, and then there's also there are other kinds of costs. I mean, you have things like, travel, or the cost of a training class. If you're bringing a contractor in on a fixed price contract, and then there's also the timing of the costs, like when, because they don't, I mean, you're right, with time or with labor, yes, the tools can track when that labor cost occurs. But when you have something like travel, so when do you want to have that appear in the project? Same thing with the contractor, things like, or permits, just, different things like
Oh,
that.
yeah.
So there are a lot of things that I know that, for example, some of the tools that I looked at, it wouldn't even handle the labor costs. You would basically just put a cost on a task that,
Wow.
that
Yes. Well, hopefully it's tens of thousands of dollars, this many tens of thousands of dollars in labor costs. But if we go over by a month, then it's going to be way beyond that. And you
Mhm.
can't subdivide that. Wow. Yep. It's true.
Yeah.
I love that. So estimating and cost control.
Another one, and I'm not sure I have a funny story about it, but another thing that tools don't do a very good job with is, even if they offer like Gantt charts for scheduling, so you actually have a Gantt chart and you can create dependencies between tasks, and it's like, oh, I have a schedule, great.
Yeah.
But the tools, when it comes down to, first of all, when you start assigning people to tasks, and, and they go on vacation, or something else happens, or, there's a delay, and then that person isn't available, they can't start until a certain date. Or people work different, they don't work full time.
Yep.
They have varying schedules. And when you start taking into account all of these different things that happen with the people who
Yeah.
work on the project, there just aren't enough features to make that happen. And so the somewhat funny story is, I use Microsoft Project a lot. And I have spent hours, probably days, maybe even weeks, playing around with the resource allocation tool in Microsoft Project to try to get it to work out when tasks need to occur, based on the various constraints in the project. It's like, no matter like what I did, it really just, it can't do it, because it's very complicated. I think there are probably some software tools out there that that people have put together specifically to handle those things, but that ability just does not seem to be available in all the main tools on the market.
It makes perfect sense that would, the more complicated, the more many different factors there are, the more they interplay between each other. And even though even AI is good at even understanding some of that scenario, but it can't, what's funny is this all circles back to the one note I made for myself going into this episode. The first thing that came to mind for me was all the people stuff.
Yeah.
People stuff is what AI software, none of it can do, right? You got to deal with all of the people. As a project manager, you're dealing with all the different personalities. You talked about hours. You talked about somebody going on vacation. You got this person's part-time and they only work on Fridays, which means even if you plan it for a 5-day period, but they don't get it that Friday, it's going to be a whole nother week. Cause And it's not even that like the person's part-time. It might just be you only have access to them for 4 hours a week because they're on other projects too. I mean, like there's all those different factors. And that's where the beauty of your brain, you as a human being, you as a really experienced project manager, that's where you deliver the value is all of the people stuff, because they cannot outsource that to software. This is maybe like a random question, but I want to ask you, since you've been in this game for a long time, Bonnie, what are some of your favorite non-tech hacks that you can use to manage projects effectively? What comes to mind for you?
All right, the first thing is, if it isn't offered to you, ask for contingency time and money for your project.
Okay.
And that contingency time and money can be helpful in a lot of different ways. I mean, first of all, when you think about risks, there are risks that you can identify, and if you can identify them, you can plan for them, and you can plan how you're going to handle them if they actually occur. But then there are unforeseeable risks, and you need contingency to handle these things, because you can always, if you have your risks that you identified and you actually put some money into the budget and time into the schedule to address those things, just have it there that you can use. But then there are the things that you really can't foresee, and that contingency time really comes in handy. How you choose contingency time, a lot of times companies will have a percentage that they will, allocate based on the budget for the project. And, and if they have something like that, then that's what you get, unless you have some way to convince them otherwise. The other thing, which is somewhat related to contingency time, but it's a little bit different, is when you have your project schedule and you have all these tasks and you have certain tasks that come in a sequence that leads up to a deliverable, and, there are all these different parts. If you ask people to estimate, going back to the estimating, here's a people thing. You will have people who will pad their estimates when they give them to you.
Sure.
Because they want to have that flexibility. It's human nature. If you want to succeed, you're going to do that.
Yeah.
The next thing is project managers will pad the estimates that they give to management, again, to make sure everything goes well and that they, in the end, look good. So the thing is, first of all, so how do you know whether an estimate is padded? And how do you know how many levels of padding went into the estimate that finally gets to the person who's going to approve the project? I mean, it's just, it's almost impossible. So it's my hack. What you do is you add shared buffers in your schedule. So at the end of a string of tasks, you will have a buffer that can handle things that go wrong, delays and someone getting sick, whatever it is. But not every task is going to be a disaster. Instead of, and if you explain to people, it's like, we have a shared buffer. So you don't have to protect yourself in your estimates, because we've added these buffers to the sequences. And that way, and I'm not saying it's going to be instantaneous that they're going to feel comfortable, but just working with people and letting them know that is there. Basically, we've got CYA built in. You have a much better chance of having more accurate estimates that are not padded.
And that's also helpful, because then you call it out specifically in terms of, this is how long that I think it's going to take at the time, and this is the buffer. And so you do differentiate that. So when you're the project manager, you can look at that and know that, and you can share that with higher ups. Yeah. Oh, that's a really good point. I like that.
And another related point to that is, you also don't ask people for one number.
Yeah, it's 3, right? Low, medium, high, right? Give it to them. Yeah.
Well, it's actually, pessimistic, optimistic, and most likely. and the most likely might not be right in the middle. The most likely could be closer to the optimistic or closer to the pessimistic. So,
I like those words so much better. Pessimistic, optimistic, and most likely. And you're right.
So that's now there are some software tools out there that can actually work with, with that variation. Because, I mean, you think about it, financial software. I mean, whenever I go to like my financial advisor and then they show me the graphs of all the possibilities of, of what my investments might do. And, they're all over the place, and projects are the same way. So there is some software that can handle that, but for what you do is you can use a formula to calculate the number that you want to use based on the pessimistic, optimistic, most likely, and then you add that with your buffers and your contingency to give yourself a chance to succeed.
Yeah. Bonnie, I've got one that I'll throw in here too. I think of it as a non-tech hack, but one of the biggest mistakes I feel like is tasks get lost in the group, meaning, oh, we have to do this, or we have to try this, or so every task has to be assigned to a person. And you as the project manager hold that one person accountable. Because what happens is this team provided this thing, and then you have feedback, which goes back to the team, and everybody on the team went, oh, I thought you were doing it. And it's like, oh, no, I didn't. Oh, sorry. Oh, we didn't do it. And so instead, it's always any of your tasks that you give have somebody's name attached to it, and it's their job to lead it. Even if they're not doing it, they're the one that's fielding it or something, making sure that when you give a task, it's associated with a person. I think that's huge.
I agree with that. I'm going to do a yes and.
Yes, and let's do it. Yes, and.
So, in addition, you absolutely need to have an owner for everything. But there is a form in project management called the responsibility matrix. What that does is it actually has multiple levels. So you have the person who is accountable for something, which is your owner. But you also have like people who will be consulted on this, or who will just be informed, or who is responsible. So you'll see it a lot of time as RACI. Because one of the problems is something gets dropped and that nobody does it. And another problem, which in some cases could be even worse, is when you have more than one person who is determined that they are going to be in control of something.
Yes. Yep. And then you got competition on who's actually, gosh, yeah. Well, that's a really good point. Well, Bonnie, let's do what I want to do. This is the one question, and I feel like this is one of the gold parts of this episode that we can talk about is, let's say you're training a new project manager. What are the human skills or techniques that you would prioritize over software skills, so that you listening to this, if any of the things we're about to list, because I've got my little thoughts that I was going to share, and I know Bonnie, you probably got some too. So as we run down this list, if any of these things are weak spots for you, there's going to be opportunities here on, finding this, because I think these are the human skills that you need to be successful, no matter how big or how small your projects are. This is what you bring to the table, regardless of the AI environment that we're in right now. So yeah, go ahead, Bonnie.
Okay. Well, I'm going to preface this by going back to what I said when I was describing my life as a project manager. Is project managers need to be able to do a lot of different things. They need a lot of soft skills. They need a lot of technical skills. Just there are a lot of things that they need to be able to do, and you will be learning throughout your career. So don't kick yourself if you're going, oh, dumb, I didn't know how to do that. It's just it's going to take time. So I actually, and I made a list, because there are a lot, but the first group is, these are things that come up right away and they are super important. So the first one is communication. And that is not just communicating with people. It's about understanding that you have to communicate differently to different audiences. You need to do background to understand. You also have to have the wisdom to learn people's preferences for how they are communicated with. It's about listening and learning how to listen well. There's so much. And one of the great things about learning to communicate well is, that's not just for project management, but that applies to everything you do in your life. So that's the first place to start.
Yeah. Ooh, this is good. Keep going.
The next one is time management. There is so much to do. I worked on this one project with a big telephone company. Even though I was working for one of the small companies that was part of the project, I had so much to do. I was working really long weeks, and they different time zones. So like I started super early, and a lot of times I would work past everyone else was gone. I was the only person in the office. You have to be able to manage your time. You need to understand prioritizing. You need to understand the difference between, and it's a Stephen Covey thing. It's urgency and importance. There are things that are urgent and they are not important. So you have to learn to not get sucked into those, and you need to learn to prioritize and actually put longer periods in your calendar so that you can actually think about the things that are really important but that aren't urgent. So
yes, prioritizing that stuff. It's the Eisenhower matrix, which Covey is referencing. I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, I like that, Bonnie.
Yeah. Another thing is negotiation.
Yes.
Because regardless of the size of the project, regardless of how many people are working on it, I work on projects where I am the only person on it, and I'm still negotiating with myself. It's
so true.
Proves to be very challenging. You will be negotiating. You will be negotiating with executives. You will be negotiating with vendors, with contractors, with team members. There will always be things to negotiate. So that's worth learning.
Well, Bonnie, I want to yes and with you on this one, because this was one of mine that I brought too. But the point that I want to make too is that there's different kinds of negotiation, right? I feel like sometimes negotiation, if you're coming in from the outside or depending on how much experience you have, negotiating might just seem like, all right, I start here and they start there, and then we end up in the middle, and that's like compromise. And when you're a project manager, there are times where there is no compromise. You are negotiating to get your way 100%, and there is no negotiation, but it's going to feel like a negotiation back and forth. So sometimes you're good meeting in the middle. Sometimes they're wrong and you need to get them around. Sometimes, so it's like, it's negotiating in different, maybe it's not different forms. That's also, there's a little bit of sales and a little bit of selling, like there's a lot that goes into that. But when we say negotiation, it's just not always meet in the middle. That's not negotiation.
Another thing with when you're in those negotiations where it's not compromise, one of the techniques that I really like is that idea of at least attempting to find something that is important to the other person that you don't care about. So you can give them something that they want that really just doesn't affect you at all, and then they'll be hopefully more willing to give you something that is important to you. So and it's interesting how often that really is true, because people have different things that they want.
Yeah. if you show up and you're I win, you lose, nobody wants to lose. So then you just turned it into a fight that it didn't need to be. Look, here's how it's going to work out. Here's the way we want it to work out. And when it does this way, it's going to be good for us for these reasons. It's going to be good for you for these reasons. It's not always a lose. That's a really good point.
Yeah.
All right. What else you got on that list?
Okay. So I have two that go into the category of part art, part science.
Okay.
And the first one is organizing lots of information.
Ooh. Okay.
Because even on a small project, you will end up having a lot of information. And then if you get on a really big project, it's ridiculous how much information there is.
Totally.
And I'll go down to even a micro level. One of the things, because I did a lot of technical writing, I'm a pretty good writer. Even getting the points you want to make in an article, like a short magazine article, getting the points you want to make in an order that makes sense can be really challenging for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Because if you jump around, it makes it very difficult to understand. So organizing information really applies from the micro to the macro level. And I say it's part art and part science because, clearly there are document management systems that can help you. I have these weird little techniques that I use just in terms of naming folders and files to keep things organized. And
yes.
And I it's always funny when I see how other people name files, and it's just like,
oh God,
how
tell
can
me
you
about
possibly find what you need? So that's where the art comes in of just thinking about how you are going to make the information easy to find, easy to understand, and then it's part science because you can use tools and there are all sorts of ways to do that. But that's one of them. And then the second one is, and this second one you will have a fan club if you master this one. And that is to run meetings well.
Yes. Preach, sister. Yes. I love it. Oh my God. I'm only saying that because, man, I teach my number one session right now at conferences. I'm getting booked all over the place for this one. And the name of the session is This Meeting Could Have Been an Email. And like, oh my gosh. Yes. Meetings. So keep going. I'm sorry. I interrupted because I got so excited. No, you're saying.
And as a project manager, one of the reasons that running meetings well is particularly important in a project is when you have a task in a project for a meeting, the more people you invite to the meeting, the duration does not change, but the number of work hours and the cost involved goes up very, very quickly. So you want to make sure that you have the people who need to be at the meeting, and they need to be there, and no one who doesn't need to be there.
God. So, and can we just say, Bonnie, if you are working with a contractor or a project manager or someone who is doing this and they are not good about this, and you're on the side of the people that are paying the bill, please be vocal about these people do not need to be here. Because you're right. If they're making 50, 100, 200, I mean, some of these contracts, if you look at them, 500, 600, 1,000. Some of these attorneys are making multiple thousands of dollars an hour. You do not want to pay that person's bill to just sit there if you don't need them in the meeting. So yes, good point. I like, man.
And the other thing, the other part of that too is, and I see this all the time, and I'm pretty brutal about this because I can't stand it, is, the people who are very passionate about whatever the particular thing is that they're talking about, and there ends up being this focused conversation about this topic, and there will be 8 other people sitting there going, and it's like, take it offline.
Yeah.
Do the thing where you have the parking lot on the whiteboard, and it's like, okay, this is for you two. Take it offline. Let us know how it turns out.
Yes, totally.
And like I've called people on that. I usually don't do it, publicly, but after the first time it happens, and I know that somebody tends to do that, like I just will make sure that it doesn't happen. But yeah, if you run a meeting well, it's like people will love you, and you'll be able to get a lot more in your projects if you,
Yes.
one, don't waste people's time, but two, actually make the meetings effective. Make sure that you've captured all the action items, you've gotten owners for those action items. It
Yes.
goes on and on.
Totally. My gosh.
And then there are another couple that are very important.
Okay.
I will say some people are naturals at these. Other people are just going to have to work very hard to learn it, practice it. First one is leadership.
Ah, okay.
Some people are
Certainly.
natural leaders. If you aren't a natural leader, it's going to take a lot of work, but you can learn to lead.
I agree.
But so, take the time. When I go to the Project Management Institute, I'm actually, involved with our Denver, the Rocky Mountain chapter. And so we have this big symposium every year. And the keynote speakers, they're not always about leadership, but the ones that have been about leadership, it's amazing the nuggets that you get just from listening to someone, and you're like, oh, yeah, that's something
Totally.
I can apply. So, and then the other one is problem solving. Problem solving is, because there are always problems in projects. There's always something that you have to sort out, figure out, like, oh, what are we going to do about this?
Yeah. And you know what, by now at this point, so I'm going to have listed these in your show notes. And if there's any of these that you don't look at and say confidently, if this is a hell yes or no situation, where you look at that thing on that list and you're like, hell yes, I'm good at this. Or if it's not hell yes, if you're like, well, maybe, or a little bit, no, that means no. And that's where your opportunity is, and take some courses on it. Like you're like Bonnie said, you're not going to be an expert overnight. It's not like you missed this class in college or something. A lot of the stuff is you just haven't had to face it before. And so you learn it, but go down this list that you're looking at. And if any of these things are things you don't have, then look into LinkedIn Learning. Obviously, you can find Bonnie on LinkedIn Learning, so you can take some courses there. They're not super expensive. A lot of the stuff is available online. You can ask ChatGPT about it. Some of these things are good, but also it comes with just practicing it and doing it. So get the education, but then try that experience too. I hope that you dig in.
And the thing with problem solving that can be challenging is the fact that a lot of times problem solving requires creativity.
Yes.
And if you're not a creative person, that will probably not be one of your, really strong skills ever, just because you need to be able to think out of the box a lot of times.
For sure. Well, Bonnie, I've got two that I'm going to add, and then I got one more question for you. So two that I wanted to add that because I had made my list too. The couple that come to mind first is public speaking. If you don't already have the skill of public speaking, or like it's a hell yes or no. If I ask you, are you good at public speaking? If you don't answer hell yes, then practice is real easy. And that's Toastmasters. If you haven't already signed up for Toastmasters, they've got something called a competent communicator where you can, it's a certain amount of speeches that you have to give, but it's really just that continuous practice. Everyone that I've watched who has struggled with public speaking, who has consistently done Toastmasters all the way through, and they got like a couple of levels. So go finish a couple of those levels of Toastmasters. That's a real opportunity there, because you're going to need it when you're running projects. It's always public speaking. It's gonna be a skill. I think that one's a big one. And the other one is delegation. Because the project managers that sink are the ones who don't know how to give the task to someone else and then let them do it, because there's so much to do. Like Bonnie said, how much she was working hours and hours, and there's always going to be more to do than you have time to do. So being able to leverage the team and give away the stuff and not keep it for yourself is a skill. And so if I said delegation and you didn't say, hell yes, I'm good at this, then it's time to practice and it's time to work on that a little bit. And you need to learn the most successful people are the ones that can use a team to accomplish a big thing. And so being able to delegate and work with people that are smarter than you and better than you and get the stuff done, like, oh, so good. So I wanted to share those two. And Bonnie, one last question I wanted to ask you is, clearly you've got a career in this. What does this mean for you personally? Is there a personal story about why you're passionate about project management and still working in the field all this time? And
Well, in some respects, I mean, I'm passionate about it in part, like I said earlier in the session, that it, it's my nature. A lot of the things that you do in a project, they're just things that, like, I'm just wired that way. I like the fact that things are always different. Even take the example of, I worked as an engineer. I was like, well, that wasn't really quite right. Then I started managing projects, but then, and I did that for quite a while. But then I got into this thing where I started, writing technical books, and, I published like 35 books, and some of them are huge. Like, they're really, some of my books are actually more like weapons, than anything, because they're so heavy. And then, I got into consulting and training, and then doing the courses for LinkedIn Learning. I have done so many different things, but through, it's just that project management is the theme through everything that I've done. And so now I mostly train, but, people contact me all the time, and every once in a while they'll, somebody will have something that sounds interesting, and I will get involved with it. But, so it's just, I just find it to be fun, difficult, challenging, rewarding. And the other thing, the other thing that is really cool is, like, I actually spend a lot of time volunteering now.
yeah,
And let me tell you, like, nonprofits, when they find out that you're a project manager, I mean, I'm managing all sorts of projects for these different, the organizations, because, think about it. They need to do a lot with very few resources and very little money. And a project manager is really helpful with that.
And Bonnie, for you listening, that is an amazing opportunity right there. If any of the things we just listed, the skills we just listed, are things you need to practice, and you're not already getting them at work, you could volunteer with a nonprofit to be their project manager and learn all of these things. And what's great about that is, we just talked about delegation and how that's important. Well, if you're volunteering for them, you still have a career, so you don't have the time to go in full time for them too. So you have to learn how to just manage the project and let other people do the things. And so, like, that's like such a golden opportunity for folks who want to get better at this. Oh my God, Bonnie, I'm so glad you dropped that little nugget. That's awesome.
I have I have had so many people on LinkedIn who will send me messages in the, like, how do I get experience? And because a lot of times, companies they want people to have experience. So, well, how do I get experience if no one will hire me as a project manager? And it's like, and that is my main piece of advice, is volunteer. That could mean volunteering within the company you work for.
True. Yep.
I've done that. But it could be volunteering with a nonprofit, and then you do start, and here's the path, at least as I see it, is you volunteer, you start doing just all the regular stuff that people, they need volunteers for. Sure. And you look for places where, things aren't efficient, or they aren't effective, or, they're disorganized and they're not achieving their goals. Then you can say, hey, I noticed this, and I was thinking we could do a project to achieve this outcome, and I'd like to manage it. Most of the time they will go, thank you. And then you get a chance to practice, and you get a chance to make mistakes and learn from them. So, yeah.
Yep. Bonnie, I love that we ended up on that nugget. That is beautiful. Well, so Bonnie, here's what I love. I love that you've kind of spent this whole career doing all these interesting different things, and it's all centered around project management. And we got to talk about the things that are not available from software and from AI on that. And so I love that you're your life path has led us to this episode so that we could do this, and that you're spending your life helping with these things. I just think it's very cool what you're doing. And so thank you for spending a little bit of time with me today to talk about this stuff. I think this is really helpful. There's some good nuggets in there.
Well, I really enjoyed it. So thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. And for people who want to keep in touch with you, if they want to circle back, or what's the best play for them to keep in touch with you?
Actually, really the best thing is on LinkedIn. You can send messages, or if you end up going, I actually, in addition to my courses on LinkedIn, I do events called office hours on LinkedIn. They're live events, but you can watch the recordings after the fact. So a little bit like this. In fact, the format is a lot like this. I also have a weekly newsletter, so people can comment on things or send me messages. That's probably the best way. You can go to, I have a website, and you can send messages there as well.
Well, those links will be in your episode notes, so you can check those out as well. So, and for you tuning in, do you have a friend or colleague who does project management or knows that that's a part of their job or struggles with it or anything? If you would share the link to this episode specifically with them, I know Bonnie and I would love to know that our conversation today touched people that are facing project management and at the crux of where, well, there's all this software out there. Yes, you as the person are still super important. So imagine if your friend who you hadn't talked to in a bit sent you a text message like that, and you guys got to catch up. That's the type of meaningful communication that I hope that you can enjoy because of this episode. So please send them a note. And whether you've joined my membership, or you've taken the first step of just joining the email list, or this is your very first episode listening to Productivity Gladiator with you, I love sharing this with you, because together, these productivity skills are going to change your life. That's a wrap.
Productivity Gladiator.